right, good day to you. Thanks for joining us in our devotions again this morning on Wednesday, April 1st. This morning I was in Judges 13 through 16, and we jump back into the storyline of the people of Israel as they continue to turn their backs on God, and as a result, there's punishment in the covering of God. And they get to this place where, again, in Judges 13, they're being oppressed by the Philistine people. And we know that as the people of God cry out, that God hears their cries and he comes to their rescue. And so in this particular chapter where we begin to get introduced to a couple people of Israel, Manoah and his wife. And at this point, early on in the chapter, she is barren, unable to have kids, and she has this encounter with an angel of the Lord. But unfortunately, Manoah wasn't there at the time, and so my mind kind of likes to play some fun games with this text, but it goes into Judges 13 verse 6, and it says, the woman, so this is Manoah's wife, came and told her husband of this encounter. And it says, a man of God came to me, and his appearance was like the appearance of an angel of God, very awesome. I didn't ask him where he was from, and he didn't tell me, but he said to me, behold, you shall conceive and bear a son. So then drink no wine or strong drink, and eat nothing unclean, for the child shall be a Nazarite to God from the womb to the day of his death. And so in this moment, I'm just thinking of Manoah's response, right? He's like, all right, so you were out in the field and some dude shows up and he's looking kind of sparkly, and he's like really good looking. In fact, you said that he was awesome in appearance, and he said you're gonna have a baby. But Manoah does the right thing in verse 8, and it says that he prayed to the Lord and said, "O Lord, please let the man of God whom you sent come again and teach us what we are to do with this child." And then comes baby Samson. But I was just thinking about this in terms of our own times. Like many of us wouldn't recognize or often communicate that we've had experiences with angels. I've had some real conversations with friends who really have, and it really is an awesome experience. But I was reminded of the text in Hebrews chapter 13 that says in verse 1 and 2, it says, let brotherly love continue. Do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for thereby some have entertained angels unaware. And so just this recognition that God is still at work, his angels are still working on his side. And the encouragement within that text is, let's be those who would be hospitable, as if God is watching and seeing everything that we do. Let's be that example of Jesus, right? How often was Jesus seen reaching out to the disenfranchised and to the less fortunate, those who were in pain, right? Why don't we be those people who go out and be those super hospitable people? It's a great time for that indeed. As we continue on into Judges chapter 14, Samson has become older, and we get to verse 1 in chapter 14, and it says, Samson went down to Timnah, and at Timnah he saw one of the daughters of the Philistines. Then he came up and he told his father and his mother, I saw one of the daughters of the Philistines at Timnah. Now get her for me as my wife. Oh boy. But in verse 3, his father and mother said to him, is there not a woman among the daughters of your relatives or among all of our people that you must go and take a wife from the uncircumcised Philistines? But Samson said to his family, get her for me. She is right in my eyes. And now having the New Testament and the rest of the Bible that we can bring an understanding to this situation, when he says she is right in my eyes, I just am reminded of this phrase that what you see isn't always supposed to be. Just because you see it doesn't mean that that's the way it's supposed to be, or that's what we're supposed to have. Our flesh, our eyes, our bodies, our world tell lies to us all the time. So how do we figure out what we're supposed to do and how we're supposed to walk? How are we supposed to do this? Galatians 5:16 gives us some direction. It says, "But I say, walk by the Spirit, and you will not gratify the desires of the flesh. For the desires of the flesh are against the Spirit, and the desires of the Spirit are against the flesh. For these are opposed to each other to keep you from doing the things that you want to do." And so, this is our encouragement again this morning. Let's be those who are filled with the Spirit of God. Let's be those who are constantly led. Our example in Jesus is that he only did what the Father was doing and only spoke what the Father was speaking. And so that's something that we ought to strive towards. Asking God, continually laying it down before the Lord. What am I supposed to do? What is most glorifying to you? I see this thing in front of me that seems desirous to me. It's a little luring to me, and I want to know if this is what would be glorifying to you. And so let's be those who walk by the Spirit. As we continue through the next few chapters of Judges, we continue to see the story of Samson play out. And what happens with Samson is, first in this situation in Judges 14, we see him walking away from the wisdom of wise counsel. His parents ask him, "Hey, isn't there someone else? Isn't there someone better?" It's the voice of reason. It's the voice of wisdom from the parents speaking into him. And we see in Samson that he leaves that voice of wisdom and depends on his own flesh from that moment forward. And it's a tragic thing because we see him go from woman to woman in the next several chapters because he's leaving wisdom. We don't see his parents' voice much in the next few chapters, nor the voice of anyone else. Instead, we see Samson walk in negligence, in fact. So after leaving the wisdom of his parents, eventually Samson gets in the relationship with Delilah. Hey there, Delilah, right? That's where my mind goes. Just might be a millennial thing, but... And Delilah betrays him like 4 or 5 times. She keeps asking Samson, "Hey, what's the source of your power?" And Samson tells her some made up thing. "You've got to tie me with these undried ropes and such." And then she does that, and the Philistine people try and beat him up and capture him and all this stuff. And then it doesn't work. And this happens like 4 or 5 times. This is repetitive situations that Samson is just continuing to give into. And eventually what takes place is he tells her the truth about his hair and the source of his power lying within him, living according to this vow, this Nazirite vow unto the Lord, where he wasn't going to have a razor touch his head. And so he lost power, and ultimately that was his demise. But for us, we ought to be those who function by wisdom, especially in these times, functioning by wisdom. Proverbs 22:3 says that the prudent sees danger and he hides himself. That means we recognize there's danger in a situation and we step back from it. We recognize that fire is hot, so we step away from it. But the simple go on and they suffer for it. In other words, these other people will see the fire, recognizing that it's harmful to them, and they'll just walk right into it. So let's be those who are prudent. Let me give you just a couple other pieces about wisdom, and especially in wise counsel. We go back to the root of the Samson story, and if he would have simply taken the wisdom that his parents were offering him, his story might have gone a whole lot differently, but it didn't. And so Proverbs 12:15, let me just throw a few of these your way. It says, "The way of the fool is right in his own eyes, but a wise man listens to advice." Proverbs 11:14, "Where there is no guidance, a people falls, but in an abundance of counselors there is safety." A couple more. Proverbs 15:22, Without counsel, plans fail, but with many advisors they succeed." Proverbs 19:20, "Listen to advice and accept instruction, that you may gain wisdom in the future. Many are the plans of the mind of man, but it is the purpose of the Lord that will stand." And then finally, Proverbs 24:6, "For by wise guidance you can wage your war, and in abundance of counselors there is victory." I simply want us to cling to this morning, that God speaks through His Word. He guides through His Spirit, and He can do both through godly people in our lives. Let's make sure that we have those godly people who we're processing with, and who we're allowing to speak into our lives with godly wisdom. I hope this is a blessing to you. God bless you, and we will see you soon.